My name is Sheldon Larkin. I'm 34 years old. Born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, I spent most of my adult life as a cybersecurity analyst specializing in artificial intelligence. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be standing in front of a camera or a microphone telling the world that I met Jesus, saw other worlds, and now believe in something beyond this life, I would have laughed hard, maybe even mocked them a little, because back then I was someone who didn't believe in any of that. I didn't believe in God in heaven, not even aliens. I didn't believe anything I couldn't see, measure, or replicate in a controlled environment. In the world I lived in, everything had to be logical. Everything had to be backed by data. That was how I was raised. That was how I functioned. That was who I was. My dad was a hands-on technician working long hours in industrial maintenance, fixing heavy machinery, diagnosing breakdowns, keeping factory lines running. My mom, on the other hand, worked in corporate tech, managing systems integration projects for a major software firm. They were brilliant people, but they were not people of faith. Faith was something we never even discussed. We didn't pray at meals, we didn't go to church, we didn't read the Bible or any holy book for that matter. We weren't anti-religion. We just didn't see the point of it. In our house, science was the closest thing to truth. And truth, in our view, came from testing, verifying, proving. From a young age, I learned that feelings could be misleading, and belief without evidence was dangerous. I was taught to be skeptical, to question everything, to seek the rational explanation behind every claim. So I did always. As a child, I was more interested in how things worked than why people believed in them. I disassembled toys to understand their gears. I built basic circuits by age 10. I started coding at 12. My world was machines, wires, logic gates, and lines of code. By the time I graduated high school, I already knew I wanted to work in AI college, only reinforced what I believed. I studied computer science and mathematics. I was surrounded by people like me who are rational, driven, focused on innovation. We stayed up late arguing over algorithms and optimization models, not theology or the meaning of life. If someone brought up God, it was usually to make a joke. If someone mentioned spiritual energy or consciousness, it was dismissed as pseudoscience. After graduating, I landed a job with a major tech firm. Eventually, I moved into a leadership role, managing a team building machine learning systems for decision automation. It was exciting work, but complex and demanding. I loved it. My days were structured to the minute. I wake up at 6 a.m. every morning. No alarm was needed because my internal clock was trained. Gym by 6:15, protein shake by 7, in the office by 8. I often worked 12-hour days, sometimes more. When I worked from home, it wasn't any easier. I kept the same hours. My calendar was color-coded, and every minute had a purpose. I tracked my steps, my sleep, my calories, my productivity. My life was clean, controlled, and measured. If I felt tired, I assumed it was from poor sleep. If I felt disconnected, I told myself I needed more focus. If I felt anything deeper than that, I ignored it. Feelings weren't useful. Results were, I didn't drink much. I didn't party. I didn't date seriously. I didn't have time for philosophy, for deep conversations, or for wonder. Wonder to me was something children had, or people who didn't understand how the world worked. I was efficient, and I was proud of it. And religion, that was something I had no patience for. I didn't hate religious people. I just didn't take them seriously. I believed they were weak in a way, needing comfort, needing stories, needing answers they couldn't find on their own. To me, belief in God was like belief in fairy tales. It was an emotional crutch. I respected their right to believe. Of course, I just didn't believe any of it myself. Heaven, that was wishful thinking. Hell, manipulation. The soul, a poetic word for neurons firing in the brain. Death, just a moment when those neurons stop firing. I read about near-death experiences from time to time. Not because I believed them, but because I liked debunking them. I would read someone's testimony about seeing light or meeting loved ones and immediately think oxygen deprivation, endorphins, brain chemistry, the mind under stress can do strange things. That was all that ever was. Science misinterpreted. As for aliens, I thought people were just looking for mystery. I never denied the possibility that life might exist elsewhere in the universe. Statistically, it's likely. But the idea that intelligent life was visiting Earth, watching us, or making contact, no, that was fantasy. That was what people believed when they needed something bigger to fill their emptiness. I wasn't empty. I had goals. I had routines. I had control. At least that's what I believed. Looking back now, I see how blind I was. I see how small my world really was. I had convinced myself that I had it all figured out, that my way of thinking was superior, that the world could be reduced to numbers, functions, and algorithms. But I was missing something important, something vital. And slowly, cracks began to form in that perfect structure I had built. It started as fatigue. At first, I thought I was just tired from work. I had been leading a major AI project, something big, something with a tight deadline. I was working day and night, barely sleeping, barely eating, right? I told myself it was normal, part of the grind. Success doesn't come without pressure. But the tiredness didn't go away. It wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, spiritual. Though I would never have used that word at the time. I started waking up without energy. I would sit in front of my computer and stare at the screen, unable to think. Simple tasks became hard. My focus was gone. My motivation was slipping. I tried harder. I drank more coffee. I doubled down on my schedule. I refused to admit that something was wrong. But something was wrong. There was this quiet heaviness settling into my life, like I was carrying a weight I couldn't name. It was in the silence between tasks. It was in the empty space between achievements. It was there when I turned off the lights at night and lay in bed unable to sleep. A strange thought began to creep in, something I hadn't felt in years. What if this wasn't enough? What if the routines, the systems, the success wasn't the whole picture? I pushed the thought away, told myself I was just tired, that I needed rest, that it would pass. But it didn't pass. And what I didn't know then was that something was coming, something that would take everything I thought I knew and flip it upside down. By the time winter rolled around that year, my body was present, but my mind wasn't. I had become a ghost in my own life. Our AI project had reached a critical stage. We were building a predictive modeling system meant to assist decision-making in high-risk environments, including finance, logistics, possibly even defense. The stakes were huge. There were partners watching, stakeholders waiting, pressure mounting. We were dealing with a massive data set, feeding it into a custom neural network with real-time learning adjustments. It was the most ambitious thing I had worked on. I was leading the team and I was crumbling. 12-hour workdays turned into 16. Lunch became a protein bar, eaten with one hand while the other typed. Meetings blended into code reviews followed by back-to-back strategy sessions. There were bugs we couldn't fix, modules that refused to behave. I took it all personally. I thought if I just tried harder, pushed further, gave more, I could hold everything together. Sleep was rare. Actual rest was non-existent. I stopped answering personal texts. I ignored calls from friends. My apartment was no longer a home. It was just a place where I crashed between shifts. And then came the call that broke me. It was a Tuesday night. I had just finished debugging a stubborn error in the training model. I was staring at my monitor when my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was calm as always, measured. She never let emotions take over, even in difficult situations. But I could tell something was different. She paused longer than usual, chose her words carefully. She told me she had been diagnosed with cancer, early stage, she said. Not aggressive, the doctors believed, treatable, but still it was cancer. The word hung in the air like smoke. I didn't know how to respond. I froze. I said all the right things. I asked questions. I said I'd help in any way I could. But as I hung up the call, my hands were shaking. I stared at the screen in front of me, and for the first time in years, the lines of code meant nothing. My mother, a logical, careful, almost mechanical in her way of living, was now facing something that didn't follow rules, something that couldn't be planned or programmed, something that didn't care about intelligence or preparation. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes open, thoughts circling like vultures. What if she didn't survive? What if this was the beginning of the end? And then came the question that scared me more than any medical diagnosis. What happens after? What happens when we die? I didn't have an answer. I had spent my entire life convinced that death was the end, that once the body shuts down, that's it. But in that moment, that belief didn't bring me peace. It brought me dread. I started to realize how disconnected I had become, not just from others, but from myself. I hadn't taken a real break in years. I hadn't sat in silence. I hadn't looked inward. I was a machine doing tasks, fulfilling roles, but I wasn't living. Something had been missing for a long time. I just hadn't allowed myself to feel it. I started going through the motions at work. I attended meetings. I wrote code, but inside I was somewhere else. I have become distant and numb. The routines that had once given me comfort now felt like a cage. I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't focus, I couldn't even care. And then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a blinking cursor on my terminal, when a thought popped into my head. It was completely unplanned, completely out of character. I need to leave, just like that. No preamble, no logic, just a deep, quiet certainty that I needed to go. I don't mean quitting my job or abandoning my responsibilities. I just needed to step away to get out of the city, away from concrete and screens and endless deadlines. I don't know where the idea came from, but once it was there, I couldn't shake it. I remembered something my friend John had once mentioned. A hiking trail in the starved Rock State Park, secluded, quiet. He had said it helped him clear his mind when nothing else worked. At the time, I'd brushed it off as New Age nonsense. The idea of reconnecting with nature had always sounded ridiculous to me, but now, it didn't sound ridiculous. It sounded necessary. I went online and checked the location. Utica, IL, about a 90-minute drive from Chicago. I checked the weather. Cold but manageable. I booked a cabin for 2 nights, just a small place with no internet, no cell service, no noise. The next morning, I packed a bag, some clothes, a water bottle, a flashlight. I didn't plan too much. I didn't even tell many people. I just went. I told myself it was a break, nothing more, not a crisis, not a turning point, just a mental reset, something to shake the dust off and return fresh. But deep down, I think I knew it was something more. The drive started early. I left before sunrise while the city was still asleep. The streets were empty. The skyline faded behind me as I drove east toward something I couldn't name. The further I got from Chicago, the more I felt a strange kind of peace. The road curved through hills and open fields. Trees began to appear. The air changed. The light shifted. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. It was strange. I hadn't realized how heavy the city had become, how much it had pressed down on me. With its concrete walls and blinking notifications and endless race to nowhere, I drove in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the sound of tires on pavement and the occasional gust of wind against the windshield. Somewhere around mile 200, I stopped for gas. I looked at my reflection in the side window. My face looked tired, older than I remembered. My eyes had dark circles. My skin looked pale. I asked myself, who are you right now? I didn't have an answer. I kept driving. As I got closer to the starved Rock State Park range, the roads narrowed. Snow appeared in patches. The trees stood taller, the air grew colder. I felt like I was moving not just through distance, but through layers of reality, like I was peeling away the surface of my life 1 mile at a time. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was dipping low behind the hills. The trees were golden in the last light. The wind was sharp, but not unpleasant. I stepped out of the car and took a deep breath. It smelled like pine and dirt and something clean, something I hadn't smelled in years. There was no traffic, no voices, no alerts, just wind in the branches and the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. I stood there for a moment doing nothing, just listening. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt still, not frozen, not empty, still. The cabin was small but comfortable. A wooden porch, a fireplace, a worn couch, and a simple bed, no television, no Wi-Fi, just a window looking out onto the trees. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the sun disappear. That night, I slept without dreaming, without tossing, without waking up in a panic. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. No alarm, no noise, just light slowly creeping through the window blinds. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. I stared at the wooden ceiling and listened, but I heard nothing. No city traffic, no notifications, no distant hum of a server or neighbor's music through the wall. Only silence, deep, natural silence. I stepped outside and felt the cold bite against my skin. The sky was still dark, but it was turning. A pale blue stretched over the mountains, and the air smelled like pine, wet soil, and cold stone. I hadn't felt that kind of freshness in years. Back home in Chicago, even the air felt busy, heavy with exhaust, smog, and motion. But here, it was clean. Every breath felt honest, simple, like nature itself was inviting me to wake up, truly wake up. I made some tea, stood on the porch, and sipped it slowly. There was no rush. For the first time in my adult life, I had nowhere to be, nothing to answer to, and no one expecting anything from me. It was quiet outside, but my mind was louder than ever. I kept thinking about my mother and her cancer, about all the time I had wasted not being present. I thought about my job, my routines, my belief that everything in life could be organized and solved. Standing in that silence, I began to wonder, what if I was wrong? What if all my assumptions, the things I had built my entire life around, weren't the whole picture? I didn't have answers, but I felt something changing, something soft, like a door inside me slowly opening. Around mid-morning, I laced up my hiking boots and grabbed my water bottle. The air was still sharp, but the sun was rising higher now, spreading warmth across the hills. I set out toward the trail. The drive to the trailhead was short, maybe 20 minutes. The road narrowed as I went deeper into the mountains. Patches of snow lined the edges. Shadows danced between trees as sunlight filtered through the branches. The deeper I went, the quieter it became, not just outside, but inside me, too. For a man used to constant information, silence felt strange. Not bad, just unfamiliar, like visiting a country where I didn't speak the language, but still felt welcomed. I parked the car at the small lot near the trailhead. There were only 2 other cars. A small wooden sign marked the entrance. Eagle Crest overlooked 6 Mi. I tightened the straps in my backpack and stepped onto the trail. The first part was gentle, a soft incline, weaving through tall pine and fir trees. The forest floor was damp from melted snow, and the air carried a mixture of pine needles, moss, and crisp cold. Each footstep made a soft crunch. Bird songs echoed through the trees sporadically with tiny voices calling to each other from high branches. A squirrel darted across the path, disappearing into the underbrush. I paused for a second just to watch it go. I realized I hadn't noticed a squirrel in probably 10 years. As I walked, my thoughts began to slow, not stop, but soften. The usual loop of work, problems, and stress began to fade. In its place came a kind of stillness I didn't know I needed. No deadlines, no meetings, no screen lighting up my face, just earth, air, and time. Around the 2 Mi mark, the trees started thinning. The path grew rockier. Patches of snow dotted the edges of the trail. The sun now streamed through the open sky, and I could see the valleys below, ridges above, layers of mountains stretching toward the horizon. I paused often, not out of exhaustion, but out of awe. At one point, I looked around and whispered to myself, how have I missed all of this? It wasn't just the beauty of nature. It was the feeling that something bigger was at work here, something I couldn't name. A kind of presence behind the trees, the wind, the sky, not in a mystical way, but in a real grounding way. I started to feel small, not worthless, but small, in the way that a single star feels small inside a galaxy. The further I climbed, the more that feeling grew. Around mile 5, the terrain changed again. The trees were sparer now. The trail curved sharply along the edge of a steep hill. I had to slow down, watching my footing on gravel and uneven rocks. But I didn't mind. I wasn't rushing. I didn't want to. Each step felt like a kind of shedding, like I was leaving behind the person I had been. The rigid thinker, the closed-off skeptic, the man ruled by numbers and code. Step by step, I was becoming something else. By the time I reached the top of Eagle Crest, I was out of breath, but not from exhaustion. The overlook stretched wide before me like the open hands of the mountain. Miles of untouched wilderness lay below. Jagged peaks rose in the distance, their snow caps glowing in the afternoon sun. A river wound through the valley like a silver ribbon. The sky was a clear blue with wisps of cloud trailing like brushstrokes. It was the most beautiful view I had ever seen. I dropped my bag and just stood there for several minutes. I didn't move, I didn't think, I just absorbed. The wind was steady, not harsh, just strong enough to remind me I was alive. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Wonder. Pure, quiet wonder. I could have turned back then. It would have been the perfect trip. Peaceful, restorative, a small taste of stillness before returning to the city. But I didn't turn back, and that decision changed everything. To the left of the overlook, I noticed a narrow path that was barely visible. It wasn't part of the main trail. There was no marker, just a line of disturbed gravel winding along the edge of a ridge. Something in me stirred. Curiosity? Pride? I'm not sure. I told myself it was just a short walk, just a little higher. A better view. I slung my bag over one shoulder and stepped off the main trail. The path was rough, uneven, patches of rock mixed with loose dirt and melting snow. The ridge dropped steeply to one side and I had to tread carefully, but I didn't stop. The view kept getting better, higher peaks, sharper contrast, a sky so big it made my chest feel hollow. I walked for maybe 10 minutes. Then came the step. It looked solid, a flat slab of rock lodged between two larger boulders. But the moment my foot touched it, it shifted. Time slowed. I felt the ground slide. My body tilted forward. I reached for something, anything, but there was only open air. My stomach dropped. Gravity took over. I fell. The first impact came fast. A sharp slam against a jagged ledge. Pain exploded through my ribs. I bounced, twisted, and hit another rock with my leg. The bone cracked. The sound lost in the rush of wind. Then came the spinning sky, trees, rock, light, dark. I couldn't tell which way was up. Somewhere in the chaos, my head struck something hard. A flash of white, then nothing. No sound, no pain, no breath, only darkness and silence, but not the silence of the mountains. This was deeper, total, complete. And yet I was still there. Somehow, I was still me. There was no more falling, no more rock, no more sky, no more pain, just darkness, not cold, not frightening, just absence, as if everything that once defined my world had been switched off. But here's what shocked me the most. I was still aware. Somewhere in that void, without sound, without form, I still existed. At first, I wondered if I was dreaming. Maybe I had lost consciousness, and this was just my brain playing tricks on me. But even as that thought formed, I could feel something deeper. This wasn't like any dream I had ever had. It wasn't foggy or inconsistent. It was sharp, clear, real in a way I can't explain. I tried to move, but there was nothing to move. No arms, no legs, no weight. Yet I was still me. I could think, I could feel, I could remember the fall, the wind, the cracking of bone, the moment everything went dark. But here there was no pain, no fear, no rush, only stillness. Then I became aware of something subtle at first, like a glow far off in the distance. It shimmered gently in the darkness, not as a beam or a spotlight, but more like warmth made visible, golden, soft, alive. It pulsed. I don't mean it flickered like a candle or flashed like a bulb. I mean it had rhythm, like a heartbeat, like breath, like it was alive in its own way. And it wasn't just light, it was calling me. Not with words, not even with thoughts. It was more like a feeling, like a gentle invitation to come closer, to step beyond whatever boundary I had just crossed. I felt no pressure, no push, just a deep sense that I was safe, that I was being seen. I started to drift toward it. Not walking, not flying, just moving without effort, moving without movement. Time didn't exist in that space. I know that sounds strange, but I mean it literally. There was no ticking, no passing seconds. Everything was now, always now. And yet, I could still process each moment, one after the other, like a story unfolding without a clock. As I drifted closer to the light, the darkness around me began to change. It didn't vanish all at once. It soft thinned like fog burning away under morning sun, and the light grew stronger, not blinding, not harsh. It didn't hurt my eyes if I even had eyes anymore. It just expanded, welcoming me, and like an embrace that needed no arms. It's hard to describe what it felt like. It wasn't like entering a room or stepping into sunlight. It was like being remembered, like being known by something far greater than myself. The closer I got, the more I felt it not just around me, but inside me. That's when I noticed something strange. There was sound, or something like it. Not music with notes, not voices, but resonance. Like I was inside a song that was playing without instruments. A vibration that moved through everything, including me. Every part of me hummed with it. I didn't know how I could feel anything without a body, but I did. It was as if I had become awareness, self. And that awareness was tuned into a frequency I had never known existed. It wasn't just sound. It was truth. It was beauty. It was everything I didn't know I had been missing. And then came the realization. The moment I truly understood I still exist. Even without a body, even outside of time and space, I was still me. Not as a physical thing, not as a personality, but as a presence, as a soul, maybe. I wasn't just my thoughts or memories. I wasn't just a bundle of neurons firing in a skull. I was something more, something permanent, something eternal. All my life I had believed that consciousness came from the brain, that when the body died, the lights went out. End of story. But here I was, my body somewhere broken and bleeding on a mountain, and yet I was more awake than I had ever been. It wasn't just surviving death, it was stepping into a reality that made life itself feel like a shadow by comparison. Peace was overwhelming. All the anxiety, all the pressure, all the noise that had haunted me for years, it was gone. And in its place was something I had never felt before. Wholeness. Complete. Perfect. Undisturbed wholeness. There were no questions in that moment. No doubts. No need to prove anything. I didn't need to understand what was happening because I belonged in it. That's when the light changed. It didn't shift color or shape, but I could feel something or someone emerging from it. Not in the way a person walks out of a room. It was more like the presence stepped forward into my awareness. I couldn't see a face. There were no features in the way we understand them, but there was presence, identity, a consciousness so vast and intimate at the same time that it stopped me in my tracks. If I had tracks to stop in, I felt it before I fully realized it. I wasn't alone. This presence wasn't distant or observing. It wasn't watching me like a camera. It was with me, surrounding me, in me, and it knew me. Not like a stranger reading a file. It knew me, my thoughts, my memories, my pain, my pride, my failures. Every moment of my life was open before it. And yet I felt no shame, no hiding, just total unconditional understanding. I didn't hear words, but I understood something without needing to be told. This presence had been with me all along, not in some metaphorical way, literally through every part of my life, even the parts I thought were empty. Even the times I rejected anything spiritual, even when I mocked people who believed, it had never left me. It had waited, and now I was ready to see. The light grew warmer as I came closer. Not hotter, just more personal. Like a home I had forgotten existed. Like the first time I had ever felt truly seen, truly known, truly safe. I don't know how long I floated there. Maybe it was seconds, maybe years, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that I was being drawn towards something, towards someone. I didn't know who yet, but I knew it wasn't random. This was a meeting, an appointment I never scheduled, but had been expected it since the beginning. I felt no fear, no resistance, only peace and curiosity. I wanted to go further, to step all the way in, to become part of whatever this was. And so I let go of doubt, of control, of the logic I had lived by for so long. I let myself drift completely into the light. And as I did, everything else, the mountains, the fall, the old version of me faded away like a dream. I was moving closer. Something was waiting. And deep inside, I knew nothing would ever be the same. As I drifted deeper into the golden light, everything else faded. Not just the darkness I had come from, but all the noise of my past life. Work deadlines, arguments, doubts, worries, even memories of the fall. They became distant echoes like shadows behind glass, and then something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no sudden flash. The light simply began to move, not away from me, but within itself, like a quiet tide forming into a shape. And in the middle of it, he stood. I didn't see him walk in. He didn't appear with fanfare. He was just there. But the moment I saw him, I knew. It wasn't like recognizing a face from a picture. It was more like remembering someone you had always known, even if you had never met before. There were no introductions, no need for questions. I knew it was Jesus. There was no doubt, no hesitation. My heart knew before my thoughts could catch up. He wasn't glowing in the way we think of in paintings. He was the light. It flowed from him naturally, like warmth from a fire or scent from a flower. Not something added something. He simply was. His form wasn't sharp or rigid. It wasn't bound by physical lines, but it was clear, defined by presence, not by matter. He looked at me, and when he did, something deep inside me cracked open. It wasn't just that he saw me, it was that he understood me, all of me. Every part of my life, every lie I told, every time I failed, every hidden fear, every act of pride, every regret was known. And still there was no anger, no judgment, only love. A love so complete that it made me feel like I was seeing myself clearly for the first time. Not as a mistake, not as a disappointment, but as someone who had been lost and was now being gently found. I didn't speak out loud. I didn't need to. My thoughts were heard the moment they formed. And his answers came not in words, but as understanding that filled me instantly. I never believed in you. That thought floated toward him, heavy with truth. He nodded gently. I know. His voice wasn't sound. It didn't come through ears. It moved through me like vibration wrapped in peace. It carried weight without pressure, truth without force. There was no trace of disappointment in his expression, no hint of "I told you so," only compassion. I didn't feel small in front of him. I felt whole, like I had finally stepped into the one place where nothing had to be explained and everything was already known. Why me? I thought, why are you here with me of all people? And again, the answer came not from above, not from around, but from within. Because you were always searching. Even when you didn't know, tears formed. Though I didn't have eyes, I could feel them. Not sadness, just a release of something I'd held onto too tightly for too long. He continued, you believed only in what could be measured, and you followed it honestly. You asked questions. You sought proof. That is not wrong. The desire for truth is sacred. I had expected judgment, correction, a kind of spiritual scolding, but what I received was affirmation. He wasn't angry that I had doubted him. He honored the fact that I had wanted truth, even if I looked for it in machines, systems, and logic. You were not wrong to question, he said again. And his words fell over me like a blanket, wrapping me in warmth I didn't know I needed. And then I understood something profound. Science and faith were never enemies. I had lived my life as if they were locked in a war. Data versus belief, logic versus mystery. But in his presence, that division disappeared. They weren't opposites. They were two ways of looking at the same thing. I saw that real faith wasn't about blind acceptance. It was about openness, about being willing to admit there's more than what we can calculate. And Jesus knew I had longed for that more. Even in my stubbornness, even behind the wall of skepticism I had built. You built a life on knowledge, he said, but knowledge alone cannot hold the weight of the soul. The heart needs more. He didn't lecture, he didn't preach, he just shared. And his sharing changed everything. I stood or floated or simply existed before him, and I wept not with shame, not with guilt, but with gratitude, because he saw every part of me and still loved me. That kind of love is hard to explain. It wasn't emotional in the way we usually think of love. It wasn't based on attraction or duty. It was complete acceptance, total welcome. The kind of love that doesn't flinch when it sees your worst. The kind that has been waiting patiently, gently, without pressure for you to finally see what's been beside you all along. He stepped closer. The light around him didn't grow brighter. It grew deeper, like layers of understanding opening at once. And then he said something that I will never forget. He asked, "Are you ready to understand?" There was no pressure in his voice. It wasn't a demand. It was more like a quiet invitation spoken with patience and knowing. And I said yes, not out loud, but from the deepest part of me. A yes that had waited my entire life to be spoken. As that silent yes formed, I felt myself drawn even closer to him, not with my body, because I no longer had one, but with my awareness, my being. And what I saw next began to open my mind in ways I never imagined possible. He didn't move his hands. He didn't wave his arms. There were no special effects. Instead, the space around us began to shift, like layers of reality pulling back one by one. Then the question rose up in me. It wasn't planned. It wasn't forced. It just surfaced naturally from the silence between us. Are we alone? The moment I asked it, I hesitated, not because I feared the answer, but because I suddenly felt how small that question was compared to what I was about to see. But Jesus didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He simply looked at me with calm eyes and said softly and clearly, "You are not alone." And then everything changed. The golden light that had surrounded us began to stretch outward. It didn't grow brighter. It grew wider, as if the edges of everything I had ever known were being peeled back to reveal something much larger underneath. And what was revealed left me breathless. I saw space, not the empty, cold kind I had learned about in school, but living space. A universe filled with light, movement, and life. Worlds upon worlds, not just planets, but entire realms, each with its own atmosphere, its own energy, its own rhythm. Some looked like what you might imagine from a telescope or a science documentary. I mean, planets with oceans, forests, cities. Others didn't resemble anything I had ever seen. They had forms I couldn't name, structures that weren't made of matter as we understand it, colors that don't exist in our visible spectrum. And they were alive. I could feel them not just as images, but as presence, as consciousness, as civilizations. There were others. Some were humanoid. They were tall, radiant, wise beings that looked somewhat like us, but with an elegance, a grace that surpassed any human experience I'd ever known. Others were nothing like us at all. They didn't have bodies as we defined them. Some looked like pure light, like energy moving in deliberate patterns. Others were vast and formless, like clouds of thought wrapped in soundless music. And yet every one of them had meaning, purpose, intelligence. They weren't machines. They weren't empty. They were sentient, aware, and in many cases older than anything I could begin to comprehend. I turned to Jesus, stunned. "They're real," I said, thought. "They've always been there," he nodded, "long before your world began." The shock I felt wasn't from fear, it was from realization. Something inside me already knew this. It had been buried beneath logic and training, but now it rose to the surface like a memory returning. "Why haven't we seen them?" I asked. "Why don't they show themselves to us?" Jesus looked at me not with sadness, but with deep understanding. Because humanity is not ready. The words struck me hard. Not as a judgment, but as truth. "You are not hidden from them," he explained. "They know you. Many have watched, some have waited, but real contact requires readiness. And your world is not yet prepared." I didn't argue. Deep down, I knew he was right. He continued, "Knowledge without wisdom leads to fear. Fear leads to conflict. And conflict turns discovery into destruction." I saw it then, not with eyes, but in vision. Human history, war after war, division after division. All the times we responded to the unknown, not with curiosity, but with fear. All the times we tried to conquer, but we didn't understand. If a being from another world landed in the middle of a city tomorrow, how would we react? Panic, militarization, denial. Some would see gods, others would see enemies. Few would see brothers. We would turn on each other, I said quietly. Jesus nodded. Some would try to control them, others would reject them. Some would worship, most would fear. And I understood the reason we haven't been introduced to the greater family of life in the universe isn't because we're unimportant. It's because we're immature. We don't even know how to live with each other yet. How could we ever hope to live in peace with beings doomed to look like us, think like us, or live like us? They're not hiding from us, I said slowly as the understanding settled in. They're protecting us from ourselves and themselves from you, Jesus added gently. For if contact came too soon, it would not lead to growth, but it would lead to collapse. I wanted to protest, to argue that we have scientists, thinkers, people who are ready. And Jesus responded to that too. Yes, some are ready, some seek truth with open hearts, but most are not. Most still choose fear over understanding, control over curiosity. I looked again at the vastness around me, the civilizations still hidden, still waiting. And I asked the only question I could. Will we ever be ready? Jesus turned to me. His eyes held both hope and patience. That is up to you. He wasn't just speaking to me as one person. He was speaking to humanity. When your world chooses unity over division, truth over pride, love over fear, the door will open, the veil will lift, and what you call alien will no longer be alien. I saw it just for a moment, a possible future. Earth not as a fractured planet torn by war and greed, but as part of a greater community, not dominated, not invaded, but welcomed. But that future wasn't guaranteed. It depended on us, our choices, our healing, our growth. I thought of all the moments in my life where I chose logic over compassion, where I dismissed instead of asking, where I feared what I didn't understand. And I realized something hard but true. We don't fear being alone. We fear being seen. Because to be seen is to be known, and we're not ready to be known. Not yet. Jesus placed his presence closer to mine, not touching, just near. And in that nearness, I felt the question form again inside me. Then what should we do? His answer was simple. Begin by seeing each other. I paused. You mean other people? Yes, he said. See them truly, not as categories, not as enemies, not as problems, as souls, as mirrors, as family. The message wasn't about advanced technology or space travel. It was about hearts. If we can't love our neighbor, how can we love a being from another star? If we can't listen to someone across the table, how can we understand someone from another world? That was the truth. And that was the barrier, and it was one we built ourselves. The civilizations I saw were not hiding in darkness. They were living in light. And that light would only become visible to us when we learned how to see with love. I looked out again, out at the stars, the life, the enormity of creation, and I whispered within myself, we're not alone. And for the first time in my life, that truth didn't scare me. It gave me hope. What came next would stretch my understanding beyond anything I had ever imagined. It would reveal not just that we are not alone, but that everything is connected, alive, and filled with meaning. The space around us shifted again, but this time it wasn't just stars or distant planets. I saw it was something deeper. Layers of existence peeled back like pages in a book, each one more alive than the last. Galaxies spun around me, not cold or random, but with a rhythm, a movement that felt intentional. I could feel them breathe. They pulsed like heartbeats. Each one moved not in chaos, but in harmony, as if responding to an unseen melody. And then came the realization. The universe was not just created. It was alive. Not alive like a living creature with organs and muscles, but alive in its being. It was aware, conscious, not as one mind, but as many pieces playing in unity, like a symphony. Jesus didn't need to say anything. I simply understood, not in my head, but in my soul. Every star, every planet, every beam of light carried purpose. Every movement of energy, every flow of time, every ripple of gravity was part of something sacred. Creation wasn't built. It was woven. That's when I began to see them. The beings, not just the civilizations he had shown me earlier. Those were like nations and cities. These were different. They weren't limited to planets. They existed between things. In the spaces we call empty, some appeared almost angelic. They were tall, radiant, with a peace that felt like music. Others were ancient, older than stars, carrying a kind of wisdom that went beyond words. Their presence wasn't loud, but it carried weight like mountains floating in thought. I don't know what to call them. They weren't gods. They weren't aliens in the way we picture in movies. They were caretakers. Some watched, some guided, some moved gently through the strands of existence, keeping things in balance. They didn't interfere with force. They moved with purpose, like conductors adjusting the flow of a great orchestra. And I saw that we were not separated from them. We were part of the same song, even if we couldn't hear it. I turned to Jesus, overwhelmed again. Who are they? I asked, my thoughts trembling. Some are what you would call angels, he replied. Others you have no word for, but each has its place, its role. Not above you, not below, part of the whole. As he spoke, I saw how these beings interacted with different worlds. Some were assigned to young civilizations, helping them take their first steps toward understanding. Others were present in places far beyond us. That is, civilizations that had matured past war, past greed, past fear. Worlds filled with cooperation and peace. Not perfect, but wise. There were also places still growing, some in pain, others awakening slowly, and the beings moved through all of it, gently, respectfully, never forcing. Balance. That word kept rising in me. I saw that the universe wasn't controlled by power, it was sustained by balance. Everything had its place. Every motion caused a reaction. Every choice created a ripple. And then I saw Earth not from orbit, but from a higher place, a spiritual place. Our planet wasn't highlighted or set apart. It didn't glow more than others, but it wasn't dim either. It was one note in the symphony. Unique, precious, but not the center. I watched as choices made on Earth sent out vibrations, small, subtle, but real. Acts of kindness, moments of cruelty, decisions made in love or fear. Each one sent a signal. Each one mattered. And yet, none of it was lost. Every ripple found its place in the divine tapestry. Jesus turned to me and I saw a kind of quiet joy in his expression. This is the beauty of creation. He said, it is not ruled by chance. It is guided by harmony. I thought about all the times I believed life was random, a chemical accident, a series of meaningless collisions. But what I saw now was different. It was as if every atom had been placed with care. Every law of physics tuned like a string on a harp. Every planet spinning in time with something bigger than itself. And still, somehow, within all that structure, we had freedom. We could choose. Even in freedom, Jesus said, as if hearing my thought, the song continues. Your choices don't break it. They become part of it. I had never imagined that human action could matter on a cosmic scale, but it did. Not because we were powerful, but because we were connected. I saw Earth again, and I saw how it fit. Not as a mistake, not as a forgotten corner of the universe, but as a chapter, one story among countless others. Some of those stories were ancient. Some had just begun, but each one mattered. Each world, each species, each soul woven into the same masterpiece. I asked him, "Why show me this? Why now?" His answer came softly, "Because you are ready to see it, and through you others will begin to remember." That word remember echoed in me because somehow what I was seeing didn't feel completely new. It felt like something I had always known deep down but had forgotten. Maybe we all have. Maybe that's what so many of us are really searching for. Not just answers, but a sense that we belong. Not just to our families, not just to our countries, but to something greater. A living universe, a sacred design, a home beyond the stars. Jesus spoke again gently. The universe is not something you look at, it is something you are part of. That truth settled into me like light pouring into a glass. I was not outside of creation trying to understand it like a puzzle. I was inside it, part of it. Every breath, every thought, every movement I had ever made, woven into the pattern. And so was everyone else. The scientist, the teacher, the child, the stranger, the criminal, the saint. Not all choices were equal. Not all actions were good, but all were seen. All were known, and none were without meaning. As I looked across the galaxies, I realized something that brought tears to my soul. Everything matters. Not because we are watched, but because we are loved. The beings I saw were the caretakers, the guides, and they weren't enforcing order. They were protecting harmony. Not like police, like gardeners, tending life, encouraging growth, waiting patiently for flowers to bloom in the soil of free will. I asked one more question. Is there a center to it all? Jesus looked at me. Love, he said. Love is the center. Love is the law, and everything flows from it. I wanted to stay there forever in that space of knowing, in that vision of balance and beauty, but I could feel the moment beginning to shift, not ending, just turning a page. Jesus placed his presence near mine again. And I knew the next part of the journey was about to begin. As the vision of galaxies, beings, and cosmic harmony slowly faded, I found myself once again standing in that space of golden stillness beside Jesus. The wonder of it all still echoed in me, the beauty, the balance, the quiet intelligence behind every corner of creation. It was overwhelming, and yet underneath the awe, a question had started to grow. It was quiet but insistent, a kind of ache in the soul. Why can't we see it? Not just me, I had been allowed to glimpse it. But why can't we as humans see this living universe all around us? Why don't we know? And then I asked the question that had been forming since the beginning of this experience. Why aren't we allowed to meet them? Why hasn't the veil lifted for everyone? Jesus didn't answer right away. Instead, he allowed me to feel the weight of the question. Then with perfect calm, he said, "Because you are not yet ready to receive them." The words didn't sting. They didn't come with judgment or shame, but they struck deep like a mirror being placed gently in front of the human race, not ready. I had already seen that other beings exist, civilizations beyond Earth, life in forms we can barely understand. They know of us. Some watch us. Some care for us, but they wait. And the reason isn't technical. It isn't because of distance or language or lack of technology. It's because of who we are. Your world, Jesus continued, still chooses fear more often than love, still chooses control more than understanding. And as long as those choices dominate, contact cannot serve the right purpose. I saw it clearly. All the wars, the divisions, the suspicion we carry in our hearts toward other nations, other races, other religions, even toward neighbors. We defend, we react, we accuse, we cling to power even when it breaks the world around us. But we've made progress, I thought. We have peace, treaties, charities, movements for change. Jesus nodded. Yes, there is light. There is hope. But the readiness for full revelation is not measured by invention or ambition. It is measured by wisdom. I didn't fully understand what he meant at first. So he showed me not in words, but in a kind of direct experience. I saw Earth again, but not through a telescope. I saw the energy of it, the spiritual atmosphere of humanity. It was beautiful, but also chaotic. Bright spots of compassion and creativity flickering across continents, surrounded by storms of fear, anger, and pride. The energy was fragmented, unstable, like a song played by people who weren't listening to each other. You are still learning how to love, Jesus said gently. And until love becomes your natural state, not just an effort, but a way of being, you cannot walk in unity with those who have mastered it. It made sense. If a civilization built on fear were to encounter one built on peace, what would happen? We would either worship them as gods or try to control them like resources. Neither would be right. And that's when I understood something even deeper. It's not about them trusting us, it's about us becoming trustworthy. The beings I had seen, the caretakers, the guides, the watchers, and they weren't hiding out of fear. They were staying hidden out of mercy, not to punish us, but to protect the delicate path we must walk. We're still learning how to care for each other, still learning how to disagree without destroying, still learning how to seek truth without using it to dominate. Jesus looked at me, and again, I felt that presence, so gentle, so wise, so patient. This is not about being good enough, he said. It is about being willing to grow. That hit me hard because I realized it wasn't perfection that was expected. It was honesty, humility, a willingness to look at ourselves not with shame, but with truth. So what must we do, I asked. His answer came like a seed, small but powerful. You must become people of love. Not just in word, but in action and thought and how you see the other. I knew what he meant by the other, not just those from another planet, but the person next door. The one who votes differently, worships differently, looks or thinks or speaks in ways that don't match our comfort. If you cannot see me in the face of a stranger, Jesus said, how will you see me in a form beyond your world? The question sank deep. I saw how we hide behind differences. We build identities around opposition. We protect ourselves by keeping others outside the circle, and it keeps us from growing. The next step for humanity is not out into space. Jesus said it is inward into the heart, into healing. We always talk about advancement like it's a line going forward. Better machines, better tools, better speed. But what if true advancement is vertical, down into the roots, up into the soul? I saw the future again, not as a timeline, but as a possibility. A version of Earth where love had become our shared language, where curiosity replaced suspicion, where children grew up not fearing others, but welcoming them. In that world, we were ready not just for contact, but for communion, for learning, sharing, growing side by side with other life without fear, without control, without pride. But that world wasn't guaranteed. Jesus made that clear. The door will open, he said, when you are no longer trying to force it, but when you are prepared to honor what is on the other side. I thought about the door. It wasn't locked, it wasn't hidden, it was waiting. And the key wasn't technology or space travel or better telescopes. It was character, humility, compassion. Then how do we begin? I asked. By choosing love where you once chose fear. By listening when you want to argue. By serving when you would rather judge. And by seeing all life as sacred, not just your own. I saw what he meant not just as a message for the world, but for me, because how could I return from this and look at life the same way? How could I scroll past suffering and pretend not to feel it? How could I remain silent when I knew the world was capable of more? This experience wasn't just for my understanding, it was for responsibility. I was being shown the condition the state humanity must reach, not to earn access to the universe, but to safely become part of it. I looked at Jesus and I whispered in my thoughts, we have so far to go. He didn't deny it, but his eyes held peace. You are capable, he said, because love has already begun in you. And then I understood every act of kindness, every choice to forgive, every step away from pride is part of the preparation. No action is wasted. No light is too small. Because when love becomes who we are, and only then will we be ready to meet what waits beyond the veil. After Jesus showed me what humanity must become, and after I saw the condition of our world and the love waiting on the other side, I thought I might remain there forever. I didn't ask to stay, but I didn't want to leave. Not because I feared going back, but because I had found something here that felt more real than anything I had ever known, a clarity that wrapped around my soul, a peace that made sense of everything. In that place, there were no clocks, no expectations, no weight on my chest, only light, only love, only truth. But then something began to change. I felt it before I saw it, like the quiet shifting of gravity, like being slowly pulled, not yanked, not forced, but gently, steadily away from the presence of Jesus. The light didn't fade. His love didn't lessen, but I could feel that I was being called back to my life, back to the world I had come from. Back to the broken body still lying somewhere at the base of a mountain. I turned to him not with fear, but with a silent plea. Why? He didn't explain in long sentences. He didn't quote scriptures. He didn't give a speech. He just said with the same calm he had shown me from the beginning, "Because your time here is not yet complete." There was no anger in his words, no sense of finality, just purpose. "But there's still so much I don't understand," I thought. "So much I haven't seen." He nodded. "You will see more in time. But now you must carry what you've been shown, not with answers, with presence." I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but I would later. The space around me began to shift again. The vision of stars, beings, and light gently dissolved, not erased, just folded away like a book being closed for now. I felt something tighten, not painfully, but with density, a kind of weight returning to me, as if spirit was being lowered gently into matter. The freedom I had felt in that place, which was limitless, peaceful, timeless, began to narrow. I was falling back into the shape of a person, into the edges of skin, bone, breath. And then came the shock, the pain, sudden, sharp, fierce. It was as if my body remembered all at once that it had been broken. Ribs aching, leg throbbing, head pounding, my chest heaving for air like a man pulled from deep water. I gasped, not just spiritually, physically. Air entered my lungs with force and it hurt. I opened my eyes to bright lights, not heavenly lights, but hospital lights. I heard beeping, voices, movement, people shouting my name, a nurse calling for a doctor, the shuffling of feet, machines blinking and clicking. I tried to speak, but only a weak sound escaped. My throat was dry, my mouth ached, my body felt like it had been run over by a truck. And still beneath the pain, I knew where I had been. The return was not gentle. It was heavy, confusing, loud. The silence of that other place, the calm living silence, was gone. Here, everything buzzed. Wires attached to my skin, hives in my arm, the smell of antiseptic, the cold metal of the bed railing. The doctor leaned over me. I could see it in his face that he was surprised I was awake. I heard someone say, "We weren't sure he was going to make it." Another said, "Massive trauma, severe head injury, but he's stabilizing." I wanted to explain everything, to tell them what I saw, who I had met, what I had been shown, but I couldn't form the words. Not yet. The pain pulled me under again, not into death, but into sleep. Real sleep, heavy, physical, full of dreams that felt empty compared to the reality I had just left. It took days before I could sit up, weeks before I could walk with assistance. Every movement sent pain through my limbs. My leg was fractured, my ribs were bruised, my head was bandaged. But I was more than alive. I was awake. Doctors couldn't explain my recovery. One said, "With injuries like yours, we don't usually see this kind of turnaround." Another admitted something shifted. "It's like your body made a decision to fight." But I knew the truth. I had been sent back. Not by accident, by design. And the hardest part wasn't the healing of my body. It was learning how to live again, knowing what I knew now. The hospital was filled with people, nurses, therapists, visitors, family. And yet I felt alone. Not because I lacked company, but because I had seen something they hadn't, and I couldn't unsee it. Sometimes I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering how to go back to ordinary life. How to return to conversations about deadlines, rent, traffic, politics. Everything felt small now. Not unimportant, but different. Even the people around me looked different. I could sense something in them, like a quiet glow beneath the surface, like souls in disguise. I began to see strangers as something more. I listened deeper, I slowed down, I watched people the way a traveler watches a new country, and always the same thought echoed in my heart. You don't know who you really are. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to walk into the street and shout, "We are more than this. We are part of something greater. You're not just a body." But I knew that wasn't the way. Jesus had told me, not with answers, with presence. So I began with stillness, with gentleness, with patience. I started writing in my journal everything I had seen, everything I remembered. I didn't want to lose it in the fog of daily life, and slowly I began to speak. First to a nurse who asked, "Do you remember anything?" I nodded. Yes, but it wasn't just a dream. Then to my friend John, who came to visit me weeks later. He sat beside my bed and asked, "What happened up there?" And I told him, not all of it at once, but enough. Enough to watch his expression change from amusement to silence, enough to see the curiosity in his eyes, enough to plant a seed. That's all I could do, plant seeds, because most people aren't ready for the full truth. Not yet, but some are. And to those who are, my story isn't just strange, it's familiar. Because deep down we all know, we sense it in our quiet moments, in our longing, in our wonder, we were made for more. And now I had seen it. I had walked beyond the veil and come back, not to preach, not to convince, but to remind, to carry the memory of that love, to live like I remember, to treat others like I've seen who they really are, to speak when someone is listening, to be quiet when someone needs peace, to stay awake in a world that keeps falling asleep, and to wait with hope for the day when more of us are ready, because one day the veil will lift. And when it does, I pray we'll meet it with open hearts, not fear, with love, not pride, with humility, not control, because the universe is not waiting to impress us. It is waiting to welcome us when we are ready. Leaving the hospital was harder than I thought, not because I wasn't ready physically. The doctors had cleared me. My bones were healing, the bruises were fading, I could walk with a cane. I was recovering on the outside, but on the inside, I was changed. I stood at the hospital exit, holding my discharge papers, and looked out at the busy world beyond the glass doors, cars passing, people on their phones, schedules being kept. And I realized the world hadn't changed, but I had. I wasn't stepping back into my old life. I was stepping into something new, a new purpose, a mission I hadn't asked for, but could no longer ignore. I walked out into the sunlight, still feeling the echo of that light from beyond. It wasn't visible, but it was alive in me. Every step I took was different now, heavier, more aware. I had seen the truth, and now I had to carry it. But the question haunted me. How do you share something the world isn't ready for? How do you explain love without condition? How do you describe life beyond death to people who fear the end? How do you speak about beings from other realms when most people don't even believe in the soul? I didn't have a script. I wasn't given instructions. Jesus hadn't handed me a list of what to say or do. He only said, not with answers, with presence. So that's where I began, presence. I didn't run to social media or book interviews. I didn't start a podcast or write a manifesto. I simply started living differently. I looked people in the eye when they spoke. I listened longer. I stopped arguing just to prove I was right. I held space for silence even when it made others uncomfortable, and I waited for the people who were ready. They came slowly, friends, coworkers, strangers. And in those moments, I spoke. Not with fire, not with drama, with truth. I told them what I saw, what I felt, what I now knew. Not to convince, but to offer, because truth doesn't demand. It simply stands. Most people were quiet when I finished speaking. Some nodded slowly, some cried, some shook their heads in disbelief, but all of them felt something. Because when truth is spoken from a place of love, I mean not fear, it leaves a mark. I started writing, not for money, not for attention, just to get the story out, to release the weight of it. I wrote down every part of what I remembered, every word Jesus said, every image, every feeling. I filled pages with what I had seen in that place beyond time. And then I began to share it piece by piece. I didn't care who believed me. That used to matter to me. That is proof, evidence, logic. But not now, because I finally understood something Jesus had said. Truth is not dependent on belief. It simply is. Whether people believed me or not didn't change what I had seen. Whether they laughed, dismissed, or doubted me didn't change what I had felt in that light. Truth had touched me. It had changed me. And that change couldn't be reversed. Some days were lonely. Some days I wished I could forget. Because once you've seen the eternal, the temporary feels heavier. It's hard to sit through shallow conversations, hard to pretend the little things still carry the same weight, hard to focus on the noise when you've heard the music underneath it all. But I also knew I was not better than anyone else. I was simply awakened. And with that awakening came responsibility. Not to preach, not to control, not to push, but to love, to forgive, to stand in the world as a reminder that something greater is possible. Even if the world wasn't ready, even if the majority still slept, even if the veil remained closed for now, I remember Jesus' words clearly. When the time is right, the veil will lift. And when he said it, I knew he didn't just mean my personal experience, he meant humanity, all of us. We are moving through a journey, not just as individuals, but as a species. Some are ahead, some are behind, but we're all being invited to grow, to awaken, to become something more than what we've settled for. And the truth is, many people already feel it. They may not talk about it, they may not even have words for it, but deep inside, they know. They sense that there's more. They feel the hunger for something bigger than politics, jobs, screens, and survival. They're searching for meaning, for connection, for a glimpse of what lies beyond the surface. And that's where my mission lives now. Not in shouting, not in arguing, but in walking alongside people who are still searching and saying, I've seen it. And you're not crazy for wondering if it's real. Because it is. Love is real. Life after death is real. We are more than this world tells us, and we are not alone. Some days I still feel that pull, the longing to go back, to return to that golden realm, to rest in the presence of Jesus again, to float beyond time, beyond pain, beyond confusion. But then I remember what he told me. You were not meant to stay. I was sent back for a reason. And that reason lives in every conversation I now have, every soul I meet, every heart that still carries questions. I don't have all the answers, but I carry the truth of what I've seen. That's enough. That's the mission. To live as a bridge between two worlds, to remind others gently, patiently. You are more than your name, your job, your past, your fear. You are light. You are seen. You are part of something eternal. And no matter how far you feel from it, it is never far from you. Because love, I mean real love, is always near, waiting, calling. And one day, when the time is right, it will meet you face to face, just like it met me.